Fani, we were talking before we started about your name. Would you tell us what your complete name means?
So it's Fani Taifa, and Fani means prosperous. Taifa means people. So it is if you come from a prosperous people. I don't like to think of it as prosperity in the way most people think of prosperity, which is just financial wealth, but just prosperity in terms of values and things of that nature. So prosperous people is what it stands for.
That's great. It's also a Greek word for light or bright. What kind of light have you brought to the judicial system here in Fulton County?
Oh, I think that not just me, but me and my team and my administration have brought a lot of light to the judicial system. I think the first thing that we found when we came here was something we knew, that the morale of the staff would be broken. And if your staff is not operating in a way that they are proud of the organization that they represent, and that they're supported and that they're confident, that presents a problem. I've brought in 129 staff members new because I got new positions, but I also let go of some of the old staff that I did not think were aligned with the values of the new administration. And so we've hired over 200 people, and those people bring light to this office every single day. We also found that relationships with the police departments were broken. And so we have basically healed those relationships by just having honest and very transparent conversations about what we expected from them. We've changed the entire way that we charge cases now, which I believe gives the community confidence in us. Instead of just everything the police send, we charge, we actually go back and do something called collect evidence and investigate and make sure that we have the evidence so that we make proper charging decisions, which is fairer to the victims because we put together a great case for them, but it's also fair to those people that are charged, so we're not wrongly charging people. So I think in so many ways we bring light, but those are some of the first few that come to mind.
Great, that's nice. You're the first woman and first African-American woman to hold this office. How does that make you feel?
I think it's something I'm very proud of, to be the first woman in this office, but I hope to not be the last. I think that a woman can do a very good job here, and this is a very, very important seat. The reality is Fulton County and Atlanta is the largest jurisdiction in the state of Georgia. I have over 1 million constituents that are relying on us to bring them justice. And I think that it is important that they have someone here that can listen, as women so often do, can nurture, but can also hold you accountable. And most of us with mothers know that they can nurture and listen and hold you accountable.
That was going to be my next question. You have 2 daughters.
I do.
How has being a mother affected your judicial career?
I think it's been difficult. I was not only a mom, but I was a single mom most of my career. I divorced when my children were very young, 4 and 5 years old. And so they had a mother that worked. I always had a couch in my office so that my children could come there and sleep as I prepared for trial. They probably had too many McDonald's dinners. But ultimately what I hope they saw is someone that was strong, someone that was determined, and someone who could figure out how to balance and get it all done.
Very important lesson. As a single mom, you had a single dad growing up. I'm wondering what kind of lessons your dad gave you that you used on your daughters.
Probably many. One of the first things is my father constantly tells me that everyone is entitled to dignity. And so that is something that I've tried to pass down to my daughters. It's something that I impugn upon my staff. Everyone that we meet is not going to have the same education as us. They're not going to have the same opportunities, the same life experiences, but they still have value. And so that's something I hope that I've imparted on my children and something that I demand of my staff. So that's a lesson that he's taught me that I hope to teach everyone I come in contact with.
I've read a very interesting story about you growing up, that your dad would take you to court and you would sit on the lap of an old Irish white judge. What lessons did that judge give you that you've brought forward?
Oh, I think the lessons of that judge are that you can be and do anything, that people will believe in you. Even, you have to appreciate, at that time I was about 8 years old. I was being raised by a single dad and he could not comb hair. And so our routine would be that on Saturday I would go to the hairdresser, but that would be after court. So you can imagine my hair is a mess because now I've gone a whole week. So I would go into this courtroom with jeans and dirty sneakers and really raggedy hair. And what that judge saw was that my father was having this dilemma of having to sit in the courtroom and represent his clients. But then what do you do with this little girl in a public space? And so what that judge did was show me kindness. One day, I think intuitively seeing that struggle of my father, he invited me up to the bench, and that became a routine. My father said he was kind of known for being like a mean, crotchety judge. So he's kind of looking like, what's going on here? And he was whispering in my ear. And so after court, my father asked me, what was he telling you? What were y'all talking about? And I said, oh, he asked me, should they go home or should they go to the back? And he was letting me decide, or at least this little 9-year-old thought she was deciding the fate of those people that came before them. And so at 9 years old, I told my dad I was going to be a judge. And he said, well, to be a judge, you have to be a lawyer. And so in the words of a 9-year-old, I asked him, what does a lawyer do? He says, a lawyer reads and he explains. And I said, well, I can read. And so from that moment on, my destiny was set. I've never wanted to do anything but what I have the honor of doing here.
That's great. Your dad was a civil rights lawyer, but also a member of the Black Panther political party. Am I getting it right? Because I know there's a differentiation between the political party and the action party, I guess.
Well, my father was a Black Panther. That was before he went to law school, but kind of post-college. And so, yes, it's something in our history I'm very proud of. He would come back here to the South and to other places. In fact, his experiences of Georgia are that of the South. So he's kind of amazed as what he sees today because we didn't live here. We lived in California and he would come back here. My father will tell you that he's been arrested so many times that he couldn't even tell you what, he can tell you the states, but not how many times. He told me when he was taking the bar, that was one of the questions they asked, have you ever been arrested before? He said, yeah, but I don't, want to lie on this application. So I'll just tell you, these are the states. You'll have to research them. But the thing about my father's experience that has touched me so much is he talks about being a very young man and being arrested all of those times, and that it was always white lawyers that would come to get them out of jail, and that there were really no Black lawyers that the movement would call to help them. And he never talked about the negativity in those people that arrested him wrongly, but the goodness in those lawyers who would come to help them. I think that goes to that lesson of everyone has some dignity. Those Caucasian lawyers saw value in him and his peers. They believed in what they were doing, and it's what ultimately led my father to stop being a college professor and, in the movement so actively, but to go to law school and to represent people. Now, my father was a criminal defense lawyer, so I tell people that criminal defendants bought me a very good education and a very privileged life. I had the ability to go to school, to do things, but those core values that make you fight for people, they're present in me. We all stand on someone's shoulders, and I stand on my father's shoulders.
I was just listening to Judge Brown on the way over in the Supreme Court hearings, and she said that her parents were the ones who made the sacrifices during the civil rights era, and that, of course, that she's standing on their shoulders. I assume that that's how you feel about your dad and those who went before you.
Absolutely. I'm living a dream. I work very hard. Sometimes it might seem like a nightmare when I'm on day 5 of a 16-hour day, but God has really blessed me to be able to stand here. But you and I both know, as a person of color, this would not have been possible just 30 years ago. And as a woman, I can even remember when I first joined the bar, men saying that, you couldn't be in a pantsuit. That's not that long ago. I've only been a lawyer 25, 26 years now. So things are changing. Women are a great part of the bar. I hope that when women see me, they know I'm really just a round the way girl, like everyone else, but with a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifices, that I will not be the last, that a lot of us can be sitting in these seats. I can't tell you how often I'll go to meetings that are very important, that they decide the fate of Georgians. And too often when I go, I'm the only woman in the room. Often I'm the only Black person in the room. Why in 2022 am I in the room with the governor and the head of multiple state agencies, and we're talking about crime that impacts all of us, and I sit there alone? And so I hope that as women see me, they'll make sure that I'm not sitting alone next year or the year after, and that we'll continue to be present at the table. Because if you're not at the table, then you can't impact society.
That's true. Jerry wanted me to ask you about the LGBTQ advisory board you're on. Tell me a little bit about that. Did you actually start this?
So what we've done, and I'm really, really proud of this, so I'm glad you're asking, we have started an advisory board. For what I know, we're the first district attorney's office to do this. And what it is specifically to do is to deal with crimes that occur against people just because of who they decide to love, what their sexuality is. And so we've gotten a lot of great leaders, and then just regular community people that think that this issue is important. They are going to be here to advise us to make sure that we are treating those cases appropriately. And so that is going on this evening, where that board is going to get sworn in. We're one of 7 places in the United States to actually gain a grant. And so I'm going to have a victim witness advocate that their entire job is to make sure that this community is treated well, knows that they have a friend in the district attorney's office. And I'll tell you, that goes back to those core values. But when I was a prosecutor, I had an awful case of 2 young African-American men, and they had worked a job. And they came home and they came to their mother's house. We're talking about very young men, 21, 22 years old. One was the son of this young lady, and one was his friend. It was suspected that he may be homosexual. When they came home, like at 2, 3 in the morning, in the mother's living room, she just had like a cot laying there, like a mattress, but nothing else on the floor. And they came home and did what any human being would do. They just crashed. Well, mom had a boyfriend. And the mother's boyfriend for months had been saying kind of nasty things about the son, like, do you think he's gay? And I don't like the way he walks. All of these kind of very, very hateful things. Well, as those young men laid there and slumbered after working all night long, he prepared a pot like you would cook spaghetti in, and boiled a pot of water, and actually sat there and waited for it to simmer and boil. And he took that pot of water and walked from the kitchen of that apartment over to the living room, which was just right there where you could see them. And he actually dumped it on them, causing 3rd-degree burns. So I've been a huge advocate. Them and so many victims I walk around with every day. I'm very happy to announce I got a conviction on that case. We got 40 years to serve. I think he deserved every day. And just so you know that his intent was in fact a hateful one, while he poured this on these young men, he said, "Get out of here with all that gay." And I mean, they suffered in a way that you cannot imagine. When we talk to the doctors about the pain they have to be in, because I don't know what you know about burns, but you have to like every day change the bandages. And they talked about the pain. You could hear them screaming down the hall of the hospital. They suffered like that for months. So I'm a huge advocate for the LGBTQ community. It is something that is dear to me. I actually partnered with Republicans the year that happened to try to get a hate bill in Georgia, because I thought that it was important, and we had a Republican that was putting it forward. It failed. But guess what happened? Just a few years later, we got a hate bill passed in Georgia. I am excited. We have already decided to use it in cases now that I am here as a DA. And I need that community, as well as every other community, to know as long as I sit here as a district attorney, we are going to support them. And that is why we formed this LGBTQ advisory committee. I'm starting it tonight. I'm really excited about it, almost like a child on Christmas. And we are going to make sure that they just know they have a friend in this office, and they'll never be judged because of their sexuality or who they choose to love. They are entitled to as much dignity as any other victim that comes before me.
That's great, and I'm so glad that you are doing that and being a pioneer again in that. When you were elected, you were elected to make this criminal justice system fair, more transparent, and focused on reducing crime. by changing lives rather than seeking retribution. How's that working out?
I think it's working out well. I tell people I am a prosecutor's prosecutor. And so what we are using in this office is what I call a balanced approach. And so what do I mean when I say a balanced approach? I have been a strong advocate against gang violence. I think that we know that gangs are committing 70% of the crimes in this county and really throughout the nation, if we just want to be honest. They are recruiting young men and young women, and they are taking them from a life of productivity into, gang banging and committing crimes. And we're talking about everything from entering an auto to murder. We now know that they have gone into human trafficking and white collar crime. And so I am a very strong proponent of, we are going to lock people up that choose to be a part of a gang, and more importantly, do violence while they are in a gang. So that's one portion of what I'm doing, right? But at the same time, I, for the first time in the Fulton County's history, have started a diversion program. And this diversion program, we don't have to indict you. That's what it used to happen. You have to get the scarlet letter of an indictment and a formal charge, and then you could have diversion. What I am having done is I have my lawyers look at the cases from first appearance, when people first get arrested, and see, is this candidate appropriate to put in diversion? And maybe they can do community service, they can pay back restitution, they can do other things, and they never have to get the scarlet letter of a charge. But what is so unique about my program and different from everyone else in the state of Georgia and most places is I'm using my budget to pay for it. I'm using my budget to buy the books that the participants have. I'm using my budget to make sure that they have training through us. I'm using my budget to make sure we hook them up with community service partners. In fact, we're having an open house this week with the Carpenters Union. I've got the Carpenters Union to sign on and agree that people can come through training through them. They're going to pay them while in training and then get them jobs. And so when you have the right people in this seat, we can change lives. And so that is one thing I'm very proud of. Also, before I got here, for your accountability courts. So accountability courts are not like your diversion where it's like a first-time offense. Accountability courts deal with people with mental health issues or with drug issues, or that are veterans that often have both mental health and drug problems because of being in the military. It used to be before you could get into an accountability court and get the services that you needed. And these defendants may have 5 or 6 arrests, but the problem is, as long as you're suffering from mental illness, you're going to keep doing something. As long as you have a drug habit, you're going to keep stealing to feed that drug habit. And so the way the accountability courts worked when I got here was you had to, again, have an indictment before you could have the benefit of it. And in January of last year, we went to the Superior Court judges and asked them, does this really make sense? What is the point of indicting these defendants if we know that what we want to do is get them the services so we can change their lives around? And so now the Superior Court judges agreed with me, and we can actually send people to accountability court without having to indict them. But the community can rest assured that, again, we have that balanced approach. If someone fails to successfully do it, we have them waive the statute so that we can still charge them if they don't take the benefit of that program. But it's balanced. And so I think we are changing lives. 1, by removing the most violent elements from society, but 2, by going back and trying to save every person that we can. I'll tell you one other thing we've done that I think is going to just be incredible, and it's our initiative this year. I met with the superintendent of the Fulton County Public Schools, and he told me he's just frustrated. He's just had it up to here with young people bringing guns in to the schools, with fighting. And so we have partnered with him. I actually sent some DAs and some other employees over there. We looked at the school, told them security things that we saw that are just not going to serve you well. And he's asked us to come into the school, and for those middle schoolers that are really on the brink, we're going to start teaching a class to them. And I think that's in line with a prosecutor, because if I can never see them again, but in that classroom, then I've made society safer. And so we have many, many initiatives that go towards trying to turn lives around, but no one should ever get confused. I am a prosecutor's prosecutor. I was a murder prosecutor for 8 years straight, and should you hurt someone in my community, we're going to deal with you.
The first 4 years after you graduated from Emory, you were in private practice.
Yes.
What made you want to serve instead of make money off of criminals?
So I'll tell you a real practical thing that's probably not politically correct. I got married had those 2 little girls. And I was like, I think I'll go get a government job.
Ah.
And I became a solicitor, which prosecutes misdemeanors and also city ordinance violations. But God knows He has your steps ordered. So my boss, I don't think she really liked me. She put me in what was the toughest judge's courtroom. And do you know that was the best blessing that ever happened to my life? That judge was notorious for just being really hard on prosecutors. So when you're young, you think that person doesn't like you. But as you get older, you know that they must have loved you because they saw fit to pour into you. And so I had applied to sit here with this district attorney's office 2 times and didn't get any feedback. But you know, when I was put in that tough situation, I didn't fail, I soared. And so that judge, Jacqueline Barrett, she wrote the district attorney at the time and told him, you're a fool if you don't hire this young lady. And so I came over here, and the DA, I'll never forget it, he was in the front page of the paper that day. And my entire interview, he sat and read the paper and ignored me. So I was like, why am I here? Like, this is a complete waste of time. And after I finished with my spiel, who knows what 28-year-old Miss Willis was saying to him, he was like, just go out there and fill an application out. The judge already told me to hire you. And I served under him 16 years, 4 months, and 4 days.
Oh, goodness gracious. Another of your reforms, I guess, is use of force by law enforcement people. Tell me about how that's going, how you're working actually with the police to maybe alleviate this problem.
So first, let's talk about what we walked into, because this is one of those issues, and I don't know that we've talked about it yet, but when I walked into this office, it was completely dysfunctional. We can talk about the fact that overall there were 50,000 files going back, in excess of 50,000 files going back to the 90s that had not been properly closed out. And so there were just boxes and boxes of these cases. So we spent a lot of time just closing those cases out. There were over close to 12,000 cases here that had been unindicted. Now, some of those were because the system was shut down for 7 months during the pandemic. But many of them, if we just tell the truth, were because of mismanagement of the prior administration, and they had just been sitting for years, 16, 17. So we walked into that. The reason I mention that is when I walked in the door, there were 101 cases that were what you would refer to as police brutality. And so what we did was create a civil rights unit, which is a small team of lawyers and investigators, and they look at those cases. A lot of times what I found in looking at those cases, and we only got through 47 of them last year, but that 47 was probably more than the prior administration had gotten through in the last 10 years. They take a lot of resources because you got to hire experts and go back and build cases, and some of them went back as far as 2016. But just one by one, as I tell my team, we're just going to call balls and strikes. If it's something wrong, I'm going to charge it. If it's not something wrong, then I'm not going to charge it. I'm not going to worry about the politics of it. I'll sit here for these 4 years and do what's right. And so that's what we've been doing, one by one, just making the decisions on those cases. And they are very difficult cases. Too often what I have found in those cases is often the person that would be the defendant or the victim, depending on the lens that you look through it at, has a mental illness. I have cleared many, many officers, but I've also charged a lot of officers. And often what I find is the only thing that was needed was courage to make those decisions despite whatever the political current is. And that's how I try to make them. I feel like those officers, they're entitled to due process. They're also entitled to dignity, but so are the citizens that encountered them. And so that's how we've been making the decisions. And I can rest real easy at night, just making them one at a time.
I read that one of your hobbies is, you had 2 hobbies. Not much time for hobbies, right? But was reading. I'm wondering, what kind of books do you read? Do you read histories, romance novels, law texts? What do you read that maybe gets you away from all of this?
Ivanovich. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I know
she writes these very, very funny crime mystery books, but they've got like a comic edge. I love her writing. She's probably who I read to just get away. And then I spend a lot of time, like we have so many case files, so I take a lot of work home with me. And so that reading is not necessary for pleasure, but necessary.
Yeah, I didn't want to know about all those case files you're taking. I wanted to know about how do I get away from.
Well, reading is a great escape.
It
It lets your mind go to someplace else. I also am a very fast reader, so I can pick up Ivanovich on 10 a.m. in the morning, or more likely for me, 4 a.m. in the morning, and be done with that book in just a few hours. So I can escape and then come back to this reality.
How much do you sleep every night?
Oh, I don't sleep much. I think I started emailing my staff at 3:30 this morning. They are now accustomed to it. I probably knock off maybe about 10:30. I'm always up by 4.
Okay, well, I don't know if the voters knew that they were getting such a workaholic. I want to turn to your daughters. Tell me a little bit about each of them.
Oh, my daughters, they are beautiful. That's the first thing that I will tell you. They are 22 and 24. Both of them are in college now. We're on year too many, so they're breaking their mother's steel. They tell me that I graduated college in 3.5 years, so I'm very annoyed with this long journey. But they tell me their journey is not my journey. They are both very, very smart. My youngest daughter wants to be a journalist. So she's a journalist major at her university. My oldest daughter, what I think she should be is an artist. She's actually working on writing a book. So you asked me what I'm reading. I'm supposed to read this week the first chapter of her book to give her critiques. So I'll be reading that this week.
Oh, that's got to be a tough job for a mom. Oh, my goodness.
But she is art defined, like she can do everything. She's telling me now she wants to be a lawyer. I really don't think that's her path, but I'll never discourage her. She just has such a beautiful creative spirit. I think that this might narrow her. Even the way lawyers have to write is not how a creative person should write. So that's what they're doing right now. But they get me together. They are very, very smart, but this generation thinks very differently than us on so many things. Going back to that LGBTQ thing, I'll give you an example of how your kids raise you. I remember when we were first having, it was big in society, should gay people get married? And so this was a debate that, right, all us intellectuals were talking about and thinking of. I can remember sitting with my daughter who couldn't have even been in middle school at that time. And she was like, this is stupid. If they want to get married and love each other, let them get married. You and daddy are divorced. Let them get married and get divorced too. I said, well, that's kind of the end of that debate. And she's right. And, so it's like through the mouths of children, they will teach you valuable lessons. And I'm like, why are we all debating whether they should legally do this? When I understand marriage is nothing but a contract, why shouldn't everyone in society have this contract? So they're much smarter than their mother.
Thank goodness, right?
Yes, thank goodness. They get there faster.
Well, when you were at Howard, you were studying arts, weren't you?
I was political science.
Political science,
okay.
Yeah.
That's
so
just
that
a path to law school, yeah.
Right.
That's like, let's get through these classes so I can get to law school.
Now, you came to Emory Law School.
I did.
And decided to stay here, although you were, from D.C. area?
Well, my mom's in Los Angeles and my father's in D.C., and I had grown up bi-coastal.
Okay.
So I can claim either. I was born in Inglewood Hospital in Los Angeles and have spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, but also spent a lot of time in D.C. with my dad.
But now you're coming to the South. What made you decide to stay here? Was it marriage?
Yes.
Okay.
I got my husband... my now ex-husband, but my husband at the time was, he did the videos for the bar review class.
Oh.
He had some really nice legs. And I have 2 beautiful girls. So that's how that story went.
You live in the beautiful city of South Fulton. Why there?
Oh, I love South Fulton. One, it's a little cheaper than Atlanta, and I've always been a government worker. Beautiful, beautiful homes. I like the fact that there are a lot of African Americans who live there. My kids were young when I moved there. You have to remember they were elementary school. And so you have a lot of just blue collar workers and lawyers and teachers. And I thought it was a great environment for them. It actually was not the city of South Fulton. It was just unincorporated south of Atlanta. and it was cheaper. I mean, that's just the reality. I was a single mom. I could still get a decent house at a good price, but I'm not leaving South Fulton. I'm committed.
That's good.
Yay
That's
for
good
the
for
South
yes.
Side,
Yay
right?
for the South Side.
That's why we're here today.
Exactly. You've been involved in some of the most controversial cases in Fulton County before you were DA. But I wanted to ask you about the current one, about the phone call from Mr. Trump to Raffensperger. I don't care about the case, but what I want to know is how many death threats are you getting? How many hate mails are you getting because you're doing this?
Well, let me tell you this. I don't even look at all of those things. It just depends on what is going on as to what the volume of those calls are. I think people kind of forget and then they remember again. What I can tell you is that there is always an uptick if I do press. So I remember I went on MSNBC and they just asked very general questions. But the fact that I was doing that, it made us have to put multiple people on the phones. It's very upsetting sometimes to my staff. It, of course, makes me have to have extra securities, which is just really an infraction upon my privacy. But they come. But the reality is they are a waste of time. I took an oath. Maybe it sounds very idealistic, but I truly believe in the oath I took. I truly believe that all men and women are equal before the law. And that means you can equally be held accountable. But it also means you also entitled to a good investigation and dignity. And so I don't know if you know, but that call came my very first day in office on the Monday when I was walking into this office for the first time as the elected DA. All over the news wave was that call. And it took about 3 minutes to recognize that that was going to be in my jurisdiction. And in addition to the boxes I saw and the office doors I couldn't open because of what a disaster this place was, it looked nothing like this at the time. We've done massive renovations. I had to bring on massive staff. I knew that that would be something that I'd have to do as well. So the threats come. And people are not happy with me because I have the audacity to do it. But I expect them to come even more. As I'm sure you know, we start a special purpose grand jury on May the 2nd. We're going to be full speed ahead in this investigation. And I've doubled up my security. I'm very cautious in the way that I move. It does cause strain in relationships because I can't be, I just can't go hang out with my girlfriends and have dinner or go on a date or do those kind of things without having people around. But to whom much is given, much is required. I truly believe God personally selected me here for this moment in time. And I'm going to do the job that I'm blessed to be able to do.
You're going to make history again. No matter what happens, I think you're going to be history making. Has this case totally taken over this office, or are you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I told you we've employed, it is one case in the office. It does have a very specialized team that this is the only thing that they do is this particular case. But the reality is that team is encompassed of about 5 lawyers, 1 legal assistant, and 2 investigators. And so I don't know if people recognize this is an office of 380. And so the rest of the office is doing the business of the people. But that is also the business of the people. To me, the things that the government are supposed to do are 1, keep you safe. So we are here fighting every day to make sure that people are safe. And 2, in a free democracy, is to make sure that elections are not infringed upon. And so we're doing both.
Excellent, and best of luck on that. I'm certainly hoping things work out for you. Before you were a DA, you had your private practice again, and part of it was family law. I would think that family law might have a big impression on any lawyer. Is that true? Do you have cases that have pushed you forward into certain ways of thinking?
That's very interesting you asked that. I don't know if you know, but between being an assistant district attorney here and becoming the district attorney, I was back in private practice. I also had the honor of representing the city of South Fulton as the chief magistrate judge. So during that time period, my primary law practice, I did have some criminal cases, some that I've had to recuse myself off of because I became the district attorney, but I also had a lot of family law cases. So I'm gonna tell you how my life impacted my family law practice. I found that I was a father's lawyer. I don't know how that came to be, but I found that in my family law practice, what I represented most often was men trying to get custody of their children in divorce matters, and that really meant a lot to me. And I'm sure it is that my father raised me as a single daughter, but I was very successful in my practice. I've been very successful as a lawyer, and there are a lot of single fathers right now raising their children. Men get a bad rap that they don't love their children. I have sat in my office with men who have just cried, 6 foot, blue collar worker, and they have just cried over the heartbreak of the mother not wanting them to have a relationship with their children. And probably because I know the value of a little girl having a father that believed in them, or a son being able to have a relationship with his dad, it made me fight very hard. And so family law sometimes is even tougher than criminal law. It's very emotional. It impacts the part of your life that you find the most sacred. But I was very successful in that practice, and a lot of those men still call me. They'll send me pictures of them with their daughter. If some other issue comes up, they'll call me and ask me to represent them, and I'm like, I do not know how many times I have to explain to you, I cannot represent you. I had one tell me, but I don't want another lawyer, I just want it to be you. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna get you somebody good, I promise. But they still call and check up on the lawyer, and I'm like, I can't be involved in the practice of law, sir. So no, but those clients meant a lot to me. Another thing that was really exciting I got to do in private practice was I'm one of the very few Black lawyers that represented the JQC, which is the organization that holds judges responsible when they violate the law. And so I got to be a prosecutor of judges. And I think that was an awesome experience. And so I left here to actually run to be a Superior Court judge, and I lost. And I think that's an important part of the story. I lost. But when you lose, and I felt horrible about it, I went into my 401k to get money. I was not making money. It was a very low point. But I can remember sitting in my living room and being very, very confused, because in the first election, I got 49.9% of the vote, but in Georgia, you need 50.1. Then we went into a runoff, and I only came in with 44% of the vote, which was not surprising just because of the way the election was drawn at that time. But that was very hurtful. It felt like a rejection. I can remember sitting in my living room and literally just asking God, like, I'm confused. I don't understand, but will you please just lead me? And I'm a single mom with 2 daughters, and my ex-husband's never been much of a financial help. Like, that's a real thing. What you gonna do so you and your girls can survive? And I got with another lawyer, and he started giving me a few cases. And then somebody who knew my work here as a prosecutor called and said, would you work for the JQC? And after that, the mayor of my city, Mayor Bill Edwards, I will forever be grateful, asked, do you mind sitting as the chief judge in my city? And I start to get a lot of clients. And so those 2 years were 2 good years. I also represented criminal defendants and got to go into the prison system and see seas of Black men, just every kind of man a woman could want in here, intellectual, handsome. And here we are. And that experience touched me, and it was a good experience to have right before becoming the DA, so that I could understand that these are not just files. These are not widgets. These are people's lives, and we impact them at every place. And so to have that reminder of that lesson, and not just come in here as the prosecutor for 16 years, I think it was all God's divine plan.
You must have great faith, but I also read that when you were asked to start running for the DA, that you literally went to the mountains, and God told you, to whom much is given, much is required. I assume that your faith in God made you say, yes, this is what I'm going to do. and I'm going to do it, whatever you say. Is that true?
Well, it didn't actually go like that. I wish I could tell you that was the whole story. I went to the mountains too because I just needed some clarity. So let's be real clear. Being the chief judge of the city of South Fulton was paying me six figures to come work a couple times a week, a couple of hours. I could fly through a calendar. I also had a private practice going. I was starting to attract athletes and upper middle class people. It was what I would call a boutique law practice. I only had a few clients, but that was a good thing. And I was able to do both. I also had been contracted by a very big law firm, and I was representing a major bank. So things were going well. And they were going well for the first time. Like, my daughters were getting to an age of college, wasn't really just struggling to turn. It was a good season. And people start calling me from the community and they're saying, you need to run from DA because the Democrats are going to lose this seat. The current DA is up to some things and we're going to lose this seat. And I'm saying, what that got to do with me? Why is that my responsibility to do that? But the calls came from every part of the county. They were very good friends that lived in Midtown and Buckhead. There were people in South Fulton that were asking me to do it. And I remember going to the mayor and telling him that this is something that I thought I could do. Now, him and the last DA had been roommates at Morehouse. And so he told me, I can't get involved in that, but I think you would actually win and be great at that job. But I'm going to have to resign as the chief judge immediately to run. And so that's an issue for me financially. So I went to the mountains. And the truth is I didn't hear anything, not one thing. And so I'm driving back from the mountains and I'm crying because I have all of this pressure. I feel like it's what I'm supposed to do, but I went up there and I don't know. I expected God to come sit on the bed with me. I don't know, some divine something. Tell me something about what I'm supposed to do with my life. And this is going to be a huge financial hit. And I just took a financial hit 2 years ago and emptied, my 401k and things, and financially to live like that. That's a real thing that happened. And I am probably within 2 miles from my house. I'm at the CVS on Campbellton. I'm about to turn to get very, very close to my home. And I don't know what to do. I haven't heard anything. I've gone to the mountains. It was basically a waste of time. So I'm crying and the phone rings. And it's my mentor, somebody who had been very close to Mr. Howard and somebody who had been very close to me. And he said, you might as well do it. And I said, what? And he doesn't know where I've been or what I've done with my day. He said, you might as well do it. There's going to be a horrible story that comes out about the DA on Wednesday, and there's no way he can overcome it, and we're just going to lose this seat. And it was as if a peace came over me. It was as if God was saying, listen, didn't I tell you this is what you're supposed to do? But it was like that last shake for your hard-headed child. And once I made the decision on that phone call, I was at peace with it. And here I sit.
Here you are.
We have to wrap it up. I hate to. She's getting close to time. It's 11:37.
Okay.
And I just have to. You can go ahead, but
I got you. Well, you give me the 5 minutes. Okay. That's good. We don't want to waste your time here. I wanted to go back and ask you. You were a judge in South Fulton. Is that the only time you were a judge?
Yes.
And how does being a judge impact what you're doing now as a DA?
Oh, I think it does. As a judge, you just call balls and strikes. And so it's given me also an opportunity to look at people that come before you. Everyone's real respectful, right, when the judge comes in the room. But there were a lot of young people that you could turn on around. I'll tell you something. The young lady that runs my diversion program, I went and stole her from South Fulton. She had created the entire diversion program for the city of South Fulton, and she was doing some really cool things. And so they planted that seed. One of the things she would have them do is they would write papers and create vision boards of where they saw their life. And I would make them bring those vision boards to court and walk me through it. And you would hear young people, it's the first time they've really ever thought about what they're going to do and why. And because I sit here in this role, they've now deemed me important. And the fact that I took an interest in them, I believe we touched some lives and changed some lives there. But it's why you have a diversion program here at the district attorney's office, because that was only a real small place that I could change lives. And so I think that I was taken to the next level where now I can impact so many more lives. I can tell you, my oldest daughter, when I decided to do this, was like, hey, what are you doing? This was going to financially hurt us. And I said, well, if I go and become the DA, I can help a lot of people. She said, you're already helping people. You've been doing that. And I said, well, Nia, this is what I want to explain to you. If I touch one man, I impact his entire family, and then his family can do good. And sitting as a district attorney over the course of 4 years, I can probably impact, and I think at the time I told her 10,000 men's lives. The truth is I walked in here with 22,000 files. But if I can impact each of those people's lives, it's not those 22,000 people. In fact, who may benefit more than those 22,000 people are the victims, are their children, are their girlfriends, their wives, their aunts, the young men that will look at them doing things in society. And I don't think she still liked it because it was going to impact her little young life, but she got it. And as long as you can get that, you'll understand how it's truly like every experience builds on another experience. When I was here as an ADA, it without fail, I used to get the worst, hardest cases, like the worst evidence, something was messed up. And I was just like, why me? You know, they used to call me an explicit magnet. They're like, everything bad that comes in here just lands in your lap. Remember, an investigator told me, you think that's happening randomly? You just really don't have any common sense. I think they're planting those cases for you to try. But it did not make sense to me at the time. But maybe all of that was preparation for today. It's given me the confidence to do this. And even some of the political backlash I've taken, I'm sure you know, I was lead counsel in Atlanta Public Schools. A lot of the African-American community thought that that was a horrible thing to do. You're just prosecuting middle-class African-Americans. But they weren't sitting there as I literally went to the homes of hundreds of children and talked to their parents who don't have the education I have. And the school system was the only way to another thing. But I always told people, like, I was fighting for those children. And if in my obituary, that's what y'all say about me, I can live with it. But perhaps that was preparing me for all those nasty calls that come now. You know, they're of a different tenor and a different nature, and they're much more hateful. But sometimes you need the preparation. And so now it makes sense as to how I landed with that case and so many others.
So how do you respond to this hate? How do you deal with it?
Oh, listen, my father has told me since I was a very itty bitty child that you are special, you are beautiful, you are smart, you can be and do anything you want to be. That's the voice that I hear. And so what they call and say is really not very relevant to me. And I don't just say that like, that's actually real. I told you sometimes the assistants will get here, and sometimes my deputy executive assistant, who's a very sweet Southern belle, she'll be so upset because they've called and they've said something really nasty about me. And I'll be like, listen here, we have a luncheon today. What did you order for the mayor? Because I have to have lunch with the mayor. And she'll say, that's what you're thinking about? And yes, that's what I'm thinking about. What do I care what they're saying about? I'm trying to start this program, and today is my audience. And it just amazes her. So I just don't let them get in my head. It's not what they call you.
That's great. That's great. Madam District Attorney, it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.